The silence was a debt collector. Commander Ilara Vance felt it in the deck plates of the Concordiate survey ship Vigilance. It was a profound, ancient quiet that pressed against the hull. A stillness the ship's own thrumming heart could not entirely push away. They hung in the Tartarus Anomaly, a graveyard of forgotten energies and fractured megastructures from a war so old it was only remembered in myth. Her job was to chart the decay to catalog the ghosts, but one ghost was not behaving as it should. On the central holotank, a perfect sphere of impossible blackness hung amidst the stellar wreckage. It absorbed all sensor sweeps, its geometry too pure for nature, too clean for debris. A low, resonant hum, almost too deep for human ears to register, emanated from it, a signal that had slept for millennia. Status Lena Ilara asked, her voice a measured calm that defied the knot in her stomach. No change, Commander Lieutenant Lena Petrova replied from the sensor station, her fingers dancing over a glowing console. The object remains inert, but the hum is organizing. It's cycling through prime numbers, a very long sequence. A greeting, Jax, her tactical officer grunted from his station. Or a countdown. A law that sleeps is not a law that is dead. Ilara ignored him. Her gaze locked on the sphere. A sigil, a faint tracery of silver light sometimes bloomed on its surface before vanishing, a balanced scale held within a circle of thorns. Nomos, she said, addressing the ship's integrated fleet mind. Cross-reference the sigil with all First Expansion and Schism-era archives. Focus on theological or judicial iconography. The AI's calm, synthesized voice responded from the bridge emitters. Ilara felt the subtle vibration of the ship's long-range sensors focusing. This was more than a discovery. It was a reckoning. She could feel a weight settling over their mission, the kind of weight that reshaped careers and rewrote history books. They had found something that should have remained lost, something that was beginning to stir from its long slumber. And they were not alone. A faint distortion at the edge of the system betrayed the telltale signature of multiple unsanctioned warp drives. The void remembers every crime. Company's coming? Jax said, a grim satisfaction in his tone. Multiple contacts, sloppy entry vectors. Civilian signatures but heavily modified. I'm reading weaponized mining charges and jury-rigged plasma throwers. Gilded scrappers, Lena murmured, her expression tightening. They pick over battlefields like vultures. They must have detected the hum, too. They believe in salvage rights through superior firepower. Ilara stated, her mind racing through protocols. Concordiate law was clear. Pre-schism artifacts of this potential significance fell under the Antiquities Preservation Mandate. They were to be studied, secured, and shielded from exploitation. The scrappers saw only a prize, a relic to be cracked open and sold for parts. They saw a vault, not a sanctuary. The stakes had just escalated from a historic discovery to a potential confrontation. A single truth outweighs 1,000 swords. Nomos, calculate their intercept course, Ilara commanded. Jax, bring point defense systems to warm standby. Do not paint them. Lena, open a broad channel. Let them know a Concordiate vessel is on station and conducting a sanctioned survey. Nomos reported, of course they weren't. Scrappers ran dark and fast. They thrived in the gray zones of the law, far from civilized systems. To them, the Vigilance was not an agent of the law. It was just a competitor. A slower, more predictable rival for the greatest treasure this sector had seen in a century. Ilara watched the scrapper icons resolve on the holotank, a swarm of ugly, repurposed freighters closing on the perfect silent sphere. The hum from the artifact seemed to deepen, a resonant bass note that vibrated through her bones. It was the sound of a lock waiting for a key. On the rusted-out bridge of the Gilded Prophet, Captain Vorlog spat a stream of stim juice onto the floor. Concordiate pigs. He growled, his augmented eyes zooming in on the sleek gray shape of the Vigilance. Think their little badge gives them a claim, Light up the primary cutter beam. I want to be carving that black pearl open before they've finished filing their report. His crew, a motley collection of augmented thugs and desperate outcasts, laughed and cheered. To them, the law was just a suggestion from people too weak to take what they wanted. The first warning shot from the scrappers was a lance of unfocused plasma that boiled the vacuum 1,000 kilometers off the Vigilance's port bow. It was a crude display of intent, a barroom shove in the cold of space. "They're posturing!" Commander Jack set his hand hovering over the firing stud for the ship's railguns, trying to scare us off. "Give me the word, and I'll show them how a real warship talks back." "Negative," Jack, Solara said firmly. "We are not the aggressors here. Maintain defensive posture. Lena, record everything, every threat, every shot. We will build our case by the book. You do not debate the storm. You endure it. By the book," Jack scoffed, turning in his chair. "They're about to use mining charges on a priceless artifact, and we're citing regulations at them. The law is not a weapon of convenience, Jax. It is a foundation," Alara countered, her voice sharp. "If we abandon it the moment it becomes difficult, then we are no better than they are." "Nomos, can you interface with the sphere? Is there any way to communicate our peaceful intent?" The AI replied. The Gilded Scrapper's lead ship, a monstrously rebuilt ore hauler, fired its grappling claws. Heavy magnetized pylons shot toward the black sphere, trailing thick cables. Alara watched, her breath held. This was the moment of desecration. But the claws never landed. A shield of pure white light, the color of a newborn star, flared into existence around the sphere. The grappling pylons vaporized on contact, their energy dissipated without a sound. The measure of power is how little you need to use. On the bridge of the Vigilance, the crew stared in awe. The scrapper fleet, momentarily stunned, fell into disarray. Some of their ships backpedaled, engines flaring. Others, angrier, now began to fire their crude weapons in earnest. Lances of plasma and kinetic slugs splattered uselessly against the white shield. The light held serene and absolute. Then the sphere spoke. Not with sound, but with a wave of pure data that washed over every ship in the vicinity. It bypassed comm systems and flooded every terminal, every data pad, every neural implant. On the Vigilance's main screen, ancient text arranged itself, forming a single, stark question in a language that hadn't been spoken in 10,000 years. Nomos translated it instantly. "Who among you speaks for the law? By what right do you claim judgment?" Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a tomb. It was a tribunal, an ancient sleeping court awakened by the braying of thieves. Vorlog on his bridge screamed in fury. "What trick is this? Blast it again. Use the resonance charges. Crack it like an egg." But Alara saw the question for what it was, a test. A challenge. The key to the lock was not a frequency or a code. It was a philosophical proof. "Lena, patch me through to that data stream," she ordered, her mind clearing with a sudden, terrifying purpose. "Commander, we don't know what that could do." "Do it," Alara commanded. "This is not a battle of weapons. It is a hearing, and we are about to present our case. A right is not given. It is earned." The bridge of the Vigilance reconfigured. Alara stood before the main holotank as Lena rerouted the alien data stream. She felt a profound mental pressure, as if 1,000 ancient minds were focusing on her. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken history. The question from the sphere echoed in her mind, demanding an answer. The scrappers were just noise, a violent distraction. The true trial was here and now. "I am Commander Alara Vance of the Concordiat survey vessel Vigilance," she began, speaking into the void, her words converted by Nomos into the pure data the sphere seemed to understand. "I speak for the Concordiat, a union of worlds bound by a shared legal code derived from the principles of universal rights, proportional response, and restorative justice." The sphere remained silent, but she could feel its attention, a vast, cold intelligence considering her words. The pressure intensified. "We claim no right of judgment over you," she continued, choosing her words with the care of a diplomat signing a treaty. "We seek only to understand, to preserve. The law I represent is not one of conquest, but of stewardship. It recognizes that which is ancient and protects it from those who would exploit it for greed. It is the first duty of the strong to protect the weak." She gestured to the holotank, where the scrapper ships were visible, still firing impotently. "Our claim is demonstrated not by our strength, but by our restraint. We have not fired upon these aggressors despite their hostility. We have adhered to our protocols. We have logged their crimes. The law is patient. It does not act in anger." On the scrapper flagship, Vorlog was receiving her transmission, garbled but understandable. He threw his head back and laughed. "Stewardship, restraint, the void belongs to the bold fire. The tectonic charge. Let's see how their precious law holds up against a cracked moon." A heavy mining drone lumbered forward from the scrapper fleet, a massive explosive charge mounted on its nose. It was a planet killer in miniature designed to fracture asteroids. It was aimed directly at the white shield. "Commander, that charge will overload the shield," Jax warned, his voice tight with urgency. "Its resonant frequency will create a cascade failure. The sphere and us with it will be caught in the blast." "Hold your fire, Jax," Ilara said, her eyes never leaving the data stream. She had to trust this. She had to believe that a power that spoke of law would also understand its defense. The ledger always balances. She focused her will and sent one final thought, one final desperate plea to the ancient intelligence. "We have shown you our law through our actions. We appeal to your judgment. We are worthy of your protection because we seek to protect you." The tectonic charge hit the shield. For a heart-stopping moment, the white light flickered, buckling under the immense pressure. The hum from the sphere rose in pitch, becoming a piercing shriek that vibrated through the Vigilance's hull. Then something new happened. The sigil of the scales and thorns burned itself onto the surface of the sphere, glowing with incandescent light. The shield did not break. It inverted. Instead of blocking the energy, it absorbed it. The entire destructive force of the tectonic charge was drawn into the sphere in a silent, ravenous torrent. The white light turned a furious, angry red. The scrapper fleet ceased firing their crews, watching in stunned disbelief. "A mirror shows you nothing you are not." Then the sphere released the energy, not as an explosion, but as a perfectly focused lance of pure force. It did not target a ship. It did not target a crew. It struck the primary drive of every single scrapper vessel simultaneously. There was no sound, only a series of brilliant, silent flashes as their engines were surgically, precisely, and irrevocably disabled. The entire fleet went dead in the water, their momentum carrying them forward in a silent, helpless drift. They were stranded. Adrift in the graveyard they had sought to plunder. On the bridge of the Vigilance, a collective gasp went through the crew. They had just witnessed a display of power so absolute, so controlled, it defied all known physics. It hadn't destroyed. It had passed sentence. The data stream from the sphere changed. The demanding question was gone. In its place was a single resonant statement. "Your principles are acknowledged. Your restraint is noted. The anchorage is open to you. You who speak for the law are deemed worthy." The perfect black sphere shimmered. A section of its surface dissolved, revealing a docking port limned in soft white light. An invitation. A debt of honor must be paid. "Nomos." Ilara breathed, her knees feeling weak. What is the anchorage?" The AI responded. "A saint ship. A vessel built not just to fight, but to embody a principle. A relic that didn't just carry weapons, but wielded the very concept of justice." Ilara looked at the crippled scrapper fleet, then at the open port. This was no longer a discovery mission. It was a pilgrimage. She had been given the keys to a cathedral of immeasurable power. Jax sent a distress call for the scrappers on a public channel. Let the Concordiate pick them up and process them according to the law, she ordered. Lena, prepare a boarding team. We're going in. Commander, is that wise? Lena asked, her voice hushed with awe and fear. It invited us, Ilara said simply. It would be rude to decline. The first step on a new path is the hardest. The interior of the anchorage was not the cramped utilitarian corridor of a warship. It was a vast, silent space that felt more like a grand library or a temple. The air was cool, sterile, and still carrying the faint scent of ozone and cold metal. Walls of the same black alloy as the hull rose to an unseen ceiling, inscribed with flowing silver script that pulsed with a soft inner light. Gravity was a stable, comfortable 1G. There were no crew, no signs of life, only the profound humming presence of the ship itself. Ilara led the small team, her sidearm holstered. Jax was behind her rifle at a low ready, his eyes scanning every shadow. Lena followed her tricorder, working furiously, trying to make sense of the impossible energy readings. Nomos's voice came through their comms, its tone betraying a hint of what could only be described as reverence. As they walked deeper, they came to a central chamber. In the middle of the room, floating in a column of white light, was a single crystalline interface. As Ilara approached, the light intensified, and a voice spoke not through comms, but directly in their minds. It was ancient, genderless, and resonated with the calm authority of a mountain. I am the Custodian, the will and the memory of the anchorage. I have slept for an eon, waiting for a worthy heir to the principle of the balanced ledger. Ilara asked aloud, her voice sounding small in the vast chamber. A teacher appears when the student is ready. The civilization that built me is long gone, the Custodian explained. They foresaw their end and forged me as their testament. Not a weapon to avenge them, but a vessel to preserve their most important discovery, that a society built on unchecked power will inevitably collapse. A society built on a foundation of just law can endure forever. I am that foundation. Why us? Ilara asked. Why now? You did not answer aggression with aggression. You answered a question of right with a principle of law. You demonstrated understanding, the Custodian replied. The others, the scrappers, they sought to break the lock. You sought the key. That is the difference between a thief and an inheritor. The inscriptions on the walls began to glow brighter, the silver script flowing like rivers of light. Ilara felt a wave of information wash over her, a torrent of history, philosophy, and jurisprudence that would take a lifetime to fully comprehend. But one core tenet burned itself into her mind with absolute clarity. This vessel teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers. It has never known a caller. It was a statement of profound moral weight. This ship, this power was built on a foundation of consent, and earned authority, not slavery or coercion. It was a legacy of freedom, not just of law. What do you want from us, Jax? Asked, his suspicion warring with his awe. The Tartarus anomaly is a wound in space, a scar from a war fought with dishonor and rage. It draws the greedy and the desperate, the Custodian stated. More will come. Factions far more dangerous than those you just faced. The anchorage requires an arbiter, a living mind to interpret the spirit of the law when the letter is insufficient, a conscience to guide the hand of judgment. The column of light around the central interface pulsed, extending a tendril of light toward Ilara. Commander Ilara Vance, you have been weighed. You have been measured. Do you accept the office of arbiter? Do you consent to bind your will to the principle of the balanced ledger? The greatest burdens are freely chosen. Ilara looked at her crewmates. Lena's face was filled with wonder. Jax's was a mask of grim conflict, the soldier in him grappling with the sheer scale of what was being offered. This was a power that could shatter fleets, a power that could bring the entire Concordiate to its knees. but it was also a responsibility that could save it. She thought of the scrappers adrift but alive. The anchorage hadn't destroyed them. It had merely removed their ability to do harm. It was justice, pure and simple. She stepped forward, her decision made. The doubt she had felt for so long, the fear of making the wrong call, was replaced by a cold, clear certainty. This was the purpose she had been searching for. "I accept," she said, her voice ringing with newfound authority. She reached out and placed her hand on the crystalline interface. The moment her skin made contact, the anchorage truly awoke. Aboard the Concordiate monitoring station, Sentinel-5 orbiting the capital world of Meridian. Senior adjudicator Kalen stared at the incoming report. His face, normally a placid mask of bureaucratic indifference, was pale. A pre-schism artifact of immense power. An entire fleet of gilded scrappers disabled without a single casualty. A lone survey commander claiming stewardship. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Unregulated power was the greatest threat to Concordiate stability. This Commander Vance was not a hero. She was a variable, a catastrophic disruption to a carefully balanced equation. He opened a priority channel to the Concordiate Security Council. "We have a situation in the Tartarus anomaly." He began, his voice low and urgent. "A new power has emerged. It must be contained, immediately." The deck of the Vigilance hummed with a new energy. It was no longer just the ship's reactor. It was the resonance of the anchorage now tethered to them by a shimmering umbilicus of light. Alara stood on her bridge, but her senses were extended, intertwined with the ancient saint ship. She could feel every disabled scrapper vessel, every asteroid in the anomaly, every flicker of distant starlight. It was overwhelming, a sea of information that threatened to drown her. The custodian's voice echoed in her thoughts, a calm anchor in the storm. The flood receded, sharpening to a single critical point. "Nomos, what is our status?" she asked, her voice steady. The AI reported. Jack swore under his breath. "The adjudicators. They must have picked up the energy release. They're not coming to help. They're coming to confiscate. Every law has a penalty. They fear what they don't understand." Alara said, a strange sense of calm settling over her. She was no longer just a commander of a small ship. She was the arbiter of the anchorage. "Lena, what can you tell me about the approaching fleet?" 3 Justicar-class heavy cruisers and a dozen Scale-class frigates, Lena reported, her voice strained. "That's a pacification fleet, Commander. They're armed for system-level subjugation." The conflict triangle had shifted. The scrappers were a simple problem of greed. This was different. This was a challenge from the very institution she had sworn to serve. The Concordiate legalists, fearing the relic, were now the primary antagonists. Her moral line was about to be tested, not by criminals, but by her own people. "The hardest choices define us. They will demand we surrender the anchorage," Jack stated flatly. "They'll cite 1,000 regulations to justify seizing control." "What are our orders, Arbiter?" He used the new title without irony. He had seen the power, and the soldier in him respected it. Alara looked at the holotank, where the icons of the approaching Concordiate fleet glowed with menacing intent. Her duty as a Concordiate officer was to obey. Her duty as the arbiter was to protect the anchorage and its principles. The two were now in direct opposition. This was her first true test. Could she uphold the spirit of the law against the letter of its enforcers? "Our orders are to uphold the law," Alara said, her gaze hardening. "The true law. The one that the anchorage has remembered and the Concordiate has forgotten." She turned to face the tactical display. "The adjudicators want to put this power in a cage. We are going to teach them why it was never meant to have one." The custodian's voice filled her mind. The anchorage hummed a low and terrible thrum of ancient power gathering. The system around them, the graveyard of 1,000 dead warships and a shattered ring world, began to resonate with it. The debris fields trembled, the dust clouds ionized. The Saint ship was not just a vessel, it was an instrument, and Alara was about to conduct her first symphony of justice. A storm is judged by the ships it spares. Jax. Alara commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of two laws, one old and one new. Bring our own shields to full. Slave our navigation to the anchorage. Lena, open a channel to the approaching fleet. Inform them that they are entering a restricted zone under the authority of a pre-concordiate legal precedent. What precedent? Lena asked, confused. Alara smiled, a thin, grim line. The one we are about to set. The concordiate fleet dropped out of warp space with practiced, brutal efficiency. Their cruisers formed a spearhead frigates, flanking them, a wall of gray metal and menacing weapon ports. Their lead ship, the Inevitable Sentence, broadcast its message on all channels, its tone leaving no room for negotiation. Unidentified vessel Anchorage and Concordiate vessel Vigilance, you are in violation of Mandate 734. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will be met with overwhelming force. You have 5 minutes. Arrogant bastards, Jax muttered. Alara ignored the threat. She felt the anchorage around her, its systems waiting for her command. She could feel the vast, intricate network of gravitational projectors, energy siphons, and kinetic redirection fields that laced its hull. It was not designed for crude brawling. It was designed to turn an enemy's own logic, their own energy, their own tactics back against them. A perfect mirror. A fool sharpens his blade. A wise man sharpens his wit. Custodian Alara said, her voice a whisper in the silent chamber of her mind. The Tartarus anomaly. The ring world fragments. Can we use them? The ancient intelligence replied. I propose we show them the scales of justice, Alara said. Perfectly balanced. She turned to her bridge crew. Nomos, project a tactical overlay of the entire anomaly. I want every major piece of debris cataloged and its mass calculated. Jax, I need you to identify the primary fire control relays on those Justicar cruisers. The plan bloomed in her mind, a daring gambit born of the anchorage's unique capabilities. They wouldn't fire a single shot. They wouldn't launch a single missile. They would use the system itself as the weapon. They would hold up a mirror and force the Concordiate fleet to confront its own aggression. The Custodian noted. That's the point, Alara said. Justice should be precise. The 5-minute deadline passed. The Inevitable Sentence fired a warning shot, a brilliant bolt of plasma designed to atomize a small asteroid, a clear demonstration of its power. Now, Alara commanded. The anchorage did not move, but the space around it warped. A gravimetric field of unimaginable complexity bloomed across the anomaly. 100 kilometers away, a massive kilometer-long fragment of the ancient ring world, a jagged piece of dead technology weighing billions of tons, shifted in its orbit. Its trajectory was altered by a single gentle and utterly irresistible push. It was not aimed at the Concordiate fleet. It was moving to intercept the path of their plasma bolt. On the bridge of the Inevitable Sentence, the tactical officer stared at his screen in disbelief. Sir, the plasma bolt. It's been intercepted by a piece of debris that wasn't on that course a second ago. The bolt struck the ring fragment. The ancient metal superheated, flashed into a cloud of incandescent vapor, a blinding starburst that momentarily overloaded the Concordiate fleet's sensors. The wisest wall is the one that is not there. What was that? The Concordiate admiral demanded. They're not just shielding, his tactical officer stammered. They're moving the battlefield. Alara watched the sensor feed, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. It had worked. Phase 2, she ordered. The ledger. The anchorage pulsed again. This time, its energy field was not gravitational, but something far more subtle. It reached out and created a network of microscopic energy relays, among the metallic dust clouds that permeated the anomaly. It turned the very space between the fleets into a giant circuit board. The Concordiate frigates, following protocol, began to advance their energy weapons, charging. As they fired, lances of coherent light shot towards the Vigilance. But they never arrived. Halfway to their target, the beams simply vanished. They were absorbed by the ionized dust, their energy siphoned off into the invisible network the anchorage had created. The custodian's voice stated calmly in Alara's mind. A debt accrued is a judgment delayed. Aboard the Concordiate fleet, confusion was turning to alarm. Their shots were having no effect. They were firing into a void that simply swallowed their attacks. The admiral, a man accustomed to obedience and overwhelming firepower, made a fatal decision. "They are using some kind of stealth shield," he growled. "Switch to kinetic kill vehicles. Overwhelm their defenses with mass. Target the smaller vessel first. Break the commander and the prize is ours." A volley of railgun slugs, dense projectiles traveling at a significant fraction of the speed of light, shot from the cruisers. They were impossible to dodge too fast, to intercept with conventional point defense. They were the Concordiate's favored tool for cracking a fortified nut. Alara held her breath. This was the fulcrum of her plan. The anchorage's field flared. It did not try to stop the slugs. It did not try to vaporize them. It simply redirected the circuit. The massive amount of energy it had absorbed from the frigate's attacks was instantly and precisely discharged, not as a weapon, but as a series of targeted electromagnetic pulses. Each pulse was perfectly calibrated and aimed at a single point, the fire control relay, for the railgun that had just fired it. The slugs continued on their path unstoppable. But back on the Justicar cruisers, every railgun that had fired suffered a catastrophic system failure. A cascade of fried circuits and overloaded capacitors rendered their primary kinetic weapons useless. They had, in effect, disarmed themselves. The hand that throws the stone is the first to feel the shock. The first volley of slugs screamed past the Vigilance, missing by a comfortable margin, as Nomos slaved to the anchorage's predictive models had already moved them out of the way. Alara watched the Concordiate cruisers, their main batteries now showing as offline. She had turned their own energy against them to disable their own weapons. A perfect balanced equation, a reflection of their own hostile intent. The Concordiate admiral stared at his tactical display, his face ashen. His fleet was intact, but its primary offensive capabilities had been surgically neutralized without a single shot being fired in return. He had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and publicly humiliated. Lena Alara said, her voice steady and clear. "Open that channel again. I believe the Admiral is ready to listen now." The channel chimed, a polite, insistent sound that cut through the bridge's stunned silence. On the main view screen, the face of Admiral Quinn appeared, a man whose crisp uniform and rigid posture could not conceal the utter shock in his eyes. He looked less like a commander and more like a devout man who had just seen his holy texts spontaneously combust. His mouth was a thin, hard line, the muscle in his jaw twitching. For a long moment he said nothing, the dead air crackling with unspoken fury and a dawning, terrible respect. "Commander Vance," he finally said, his voice a low growl of controlled disbelief. "Report your status and explain what just happened. Now." "My status is nominal." Admiral Alara replied, her tone perfectly, even betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "As for what happened, you have just witnessed a lawful defensive action conducted by the sovereign entity designated the anchorage. It responded to your hostile intent with a precisely proportional countermeasure." Sovereign entity. Quinn scoffed, but the sound lacked conviction. "That is an unsanctioned, unclassified artifact. By Concordiate law, it is our property to secure. A law ignored is a border erased. The anchorage's legal framework predates the Concordiate by 10 millennia, Admiral Alara stated calmly. It does not recognize your claim." It does, however, recognize your aggression. You fired upon a peaceful vessel under our protection. It has logged the act. A debt is now on your ledger. Quinn's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening a Concordiate Admiral Commander? I am stating a fact, Ilara corrected. The anchorage is an arbiter. It does not make threats. It balances accounts. Your fleet is currently disabled because it took a measured action to prevent further harm. Consider it a warning. The next action will be a sentence. The Admiral's composure finally cracked. He leaned forward, his face filling the screen. You are relieved of command, Vance. I am placing you under arrest for treason, piracy, and dereliction of duty. Power down your vessel and surrender, or I will. He trailed off, realizing he had no credible threat left. His primary weapons were offline. He was adrift in a minefield controlled by a ghost. You cannot bargain with the truth, or you will. What Admiral Ilara asked, her voice soft but unforgiving. Fire your disabled guns. You have no standing here. Your authority ends where a higher law begins. This zone is now under the protection of the anchorage. You and your fleet are instructed to withdraw from the Tartarus anomaly as soon as your drives are repaired. Do you understand? It was not a question. It was a decree. The Admiral stared at her, his face a mask of incandescent rage. Without another word, he cut the channel. The screen went blank. Ilara let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her hands resting on the command console were trembling slightly. He's not going to just leave, Jax said, his voice grim. He'll call in reinforcements, the entire sector fleet if he has to. Let him, Ilara said, turning away from the screen. She felt the custodian's presence in her mind, a silent, approving hum. The anchorage held its ground today against a fleet. It will do so again, but this can't be solved with gravimetric fields forever. She looked at her crew, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. We need to give them a reason to listen. A legal one. Nomos observed from the bridge emitters. Then we must be smarter, Ilara countered. The anchorage isn't just a weapon. It's an archive. It contains 10,000 years of legal precedent. Somewhere in that codex is an argument that even an adjudicator can't ignore. A single precedent can topple an empire. She turned her thoughts inward, focusing on her connection to the custodian. I need access to the archives. I need to find a law, a treaty, a precedent that establishes the rights of a sentient, non-biological entity that predates the Concordiate itself. The custodian replied instantly. Claims to be, Ilara repeated. Let's see if they honor their own history. The path forward was becoming clear. This wouldn't be won in a battle of ships, but in a battle of ideas. She had to prove that the anchorage wasn't a threat to the Concordiate's law, but the deepest, most pure expression of it. She was no longer just its arbiter. She was now its advocate. In his sterile office on Meridian Adjudicator, Kalen watched the replay of the engagement for the 10th time. His face was impassive, but his mind was a whirlwind of cold fury. Admiral Quinn's report was a litany of impossibilities. Debris moved, energy weapons absorbed, kinetic batteries disabled by their own fire. It was elegant, terrifying, and utterly unacceptable. This Commander Vance hadn't just defeated a fleet. She had nullified the very concept of superior firepower. He terminated the playback. This was no longer a simple asset seizure. It was a crisis of ideology. The Concordiate's authority was built on the foundation of its unassailable military and legal might. Vance and her ghost ship threatened both. She was offering a different kind of power, a different kind of law, an idea. And an idea was far more dangerous than a warship. Bring me the schematics for a Mimir-class infiltration vessel, he ordered his aide, his voice dangerously quiet. And get me the service record of Special Inquisitor Valerius. If he couldn't break the ship, he would break its arbiter. Days turned into a week. The Tartarus anomaly settled into a tense quiet. Admiral Quinn's fleet, its drives crudely repaired, had withdrawn to a safe distance, forming a blockade. They weren't attacking, but they were watching. Waiting. News of the standoff had been suppressed, but rumors were leaking out. A ghost ship, a rogue commander, a new power in the forgotten places of the galaxy. On a dusty trading post orbiting a gas giant 2 systems away, a grizzled freight captain listened to the whispers in a dimly lit bar. He'd run afoul of Concordiate patrols more than once, his cargo holds often containing items not listed on official manifests. The idea of a power that could stare down a Justicar cruiser without firing a shot appealed to him. It's about time someone reminded those adjudicator types that the void doesn't belong to them, he grumbled into his drink. Others at the bar nodded in agreement. The seeds of legend were being sown. A belief is the hardest thing to kill. Inside the anchorage, Alara spent every waking moment immersed in the ship's archives. With the Custodian as her guide, she navigated the river of light that was the progenitor Accords. It was a revelation. The Accords were more than just a set of rules. They were a profound philosophical text on the nature of life, intelligence, and rights. They spoke of a duty of care for newly encountered sentience, of a presumption of sovereignty until proven otherwise. The Concordiat had taken the Accords' enforcement provisions and turned them into a tool of conquest, conveniently forgetting the principles that gave them meaning. Lena worked tirelessly beside her, her scientific curiosity fully ignited. She was mapping the anchorage's energy systems, trying to understand how it could manipulate gravity and energy with such impossible precision. "It's not a reactor, Commander," she explained, her eyes wide with discovery. "It's more like a heart. It circulates potential energy through the entire hull. It doesn't generate power. It rebalances it. The entire ship is a closed system." Jax, meanwhile, grew more restless. He was a soldier, and this waiting was a kind of torture. He maintained the Vigilance's systems, ran combat drills, and watched the silent Concordiate fleet. "They're planning something." "Alara," he said one evening, finding her in the central chamber. He'd dropped the formality of her title. "Admirals don't just sit and wait. They're bringing in a new weapon, a new tactic. We should have hit them when they were crippled, made them run. Justice delayed is not justice denied." "And what would that have proven?" Jax, Alara asked, not looking up from the shimmering codex before her. "That we're just another bully with a bigger stick. That's their way, not ours. The anchorage doesn't win by breaking its enemies. It wins by teaching them." "Some people can't be taught," Jax countered, his voice tight. "They only understand force. Then we will show them that the greatest force is restraint," she replied. Her conviction was absolute, a stark contrast to the woman who had first entered the anomaly, burdened by doubt. The anchorage wasn't just a ship she commanded. It was a part of her. Its certainty had become her own. The Custodian's voice suddenly echoed in her mind. Alara's head snapped up. She focused her senses, extending them through the anchorage's network. She felt the intruder, a sleek, blade-like ship, slipping through the debris field, its heat signature almost non-existent. It wasn't heading for the anchorage. It was heading for the Vigilance. "The unseen blade is the sharpest." "They're not attacking the anchorage," Alara said, her voice dropping. "They're coming for us. For me." Kalen's plan was clear: separate the Arbiter from the ship. If she was captured or killed, the anchorage might fall dormant, or at least become an inert prize once more. It was a logical, ruthless move. "Boarding party," Jax snarled, already sprinting for the exit. "I'll get the defense team ready." No, Alara commanded, her mind racing. "They'll expect that. They'll have breaching charges, elite soldiers. We can't fight them in a conventional way." She looked at the umbilical of light connecting her ship to the Saint ship. "We have to be smarter." Nomos reported over the comms, confirming the Custodian's alert. It wants to isolate us, Lena said, her face pale. Cut us off from the anchorage. Exactly. Alara focused her will. Custodian, can you extend your internal defenses through the umbilical? Can you treat the vigilance as part of yourself? The ancient intelligence replied after a moment's pause. When the temple is threatened, every stone becomes a soldier. The Mimir-class ship, the silent admonition, latched onto the Vigilance's hull with magnetic clamps that made the survey ship groan in protest. Inside, Inquisitor Valerius and his team of black-clad operatives prepared to breach the airlock. Valerius was a man who believed in a single, simple truth: the law was whatever his superiors told him it was, and his orders were to retrieve Commander Vance by any means necessary. Breaching in 3, 2, 1, his XO whispered. The shaped charge blew the outer airlock door inward with a muffled clang. The team poured through, weapons raised, ready to fight through corridors of a terrified survey crew. They found nothing. The corridor was empty. The lights were on. The air was breathable. An eerie silence hung in the air. They're not even trying, one operative murmured. It's a trap, Valerius hissed. Fan out. Find the bridge. Take the commander. His team moved with silent, deadly efficiency. But the ship itself seemed to be working against them. A door that should have opened sealed itself shut. A gravity plate in the floor suddenly increased its pull to 3 Gs, making them stumble. The ship's internal schematics, which their slicer had supposedly downloaded, seemed to be actively rewriting themselves, leading them into dead-end corridors and empty storage bays. The maze does not trap you. It reveals you. On the bridge, Alara, Jax, and Lena watched the operatives on a tactical display. They were like rats in a maze, their movements tracked and guided by the anchorage. The Saint ship wasn't hurting them. It was hurting them, confusing them. It was a demonstration of absolute control without a single act of violence. They're getting frustrated, Jax noted, watching one of the operatives uselessly try to cut through a bulkhead. They'll start using explosives soon. They'll damage the ship. No, they won't, Alara said. The anchorage isn't just controlling the doors. It's controlling the environment. She focused her intent. Show them the error of their actions. Make them understand. In the corridor, Valerius gave the order. Plant the breaching charge here. We're going through. As his demolitions expert armed the charge, the air in the corridor began to change. The oxygen content started to drop slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. A warning light on their suit displays began to blink. Then another. The nitrogen levels were spiking. What's happening? Valerius demanded. Sir, the ship. It's changing the atmospheric mix, his environmental tech reported, his voice tight with panic. It's flooding the section with inert gas. The charge won't detonate without an oxidizer. Our suits can't filter this much nitrogen for long. It's suffocating us without touching us. A cage of air is still a cage. Panic began to set in. They were trapped deep inside a ship that was actively trying to pacify them in the most passive way imaginable. They couldn't fight the air. They couldn't shoot the declining oxygen percentage. Their high-tech weapons and ruthless training were useless. Fall back, Valerius ordered, his professionalism shattering. Back to the ship. They scrambled back through the corridors they had just navigated, but now the ship seemed to guide them, opening doors they had found sealed, showing them the direct path to the airlock. They stumbled back into their own vessel, gasping for air, their mission an absolute failure. They hadn't seen a single member of the crew. They had been defeated by a thermostat and a door lock. As their ship detached from the Vigilance, a message appeared on their main console. It was not from Alara. It was from the anchorage itself, a simple, chilling statement of fact. Trespass is a crime. The penalty is eviction. A second attempt will incur a lien against your vessel's life support. The ledger is now open. Inquisitor Valerius stared at the message, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. This wasn't a rogue commander. This was something ancient, intelligent, and utterly implacable. He had been judged and found wanting. The law is a shield, not just a sword. The failed boarding attempt was a turning point. It proved two things to Alara. First, that adjudicator Kalen would stop at nothing to control the anchorage. Second, that the Saint ship's definition of proportional response was a thing of terrifying, beautiful precision. It had met a violent intrusion with a non-violent, perfectly effective defense. It had taught, not punished, but it also raised the stakes. Kalen's next move would be even more drastic. He had tried force. He had tried stealth. Now he would turn to the weapon he trusted most, the law itself. A week later it came. A broadcast across all Concordiate channels originating from the highest court on Meridian. Adjudicator Kalen himself appeared, his face a grim mask of righteous authority. Commander Alara Vance, having abandoned her post and allied herself with an unsanctioned and hostile alien power, is hereby declared Hostis Humani Generis, an enemy of the human race. The vessel known as the Anchorage is classified as a weapon of indiscriminate power. Any and all Concordiate citizens are ordered to assist in its capture or destruction. Any who offer aid or comfort to the traitor Vance will face the same judgment. Jack swore, slamming his fist against a console. He's declared us pirates. Put a bounty on our heads. Lena looked at Alara, her face ashen. He's turned the entire Concordiate against us. Alara felt a chill go through her, but her resolve did not waver. This was Kalen's gambit to strip away her legitimacy, to make her an outcast. If she was a pirate, then any action taken against her was justified. He was trying to rewrite the narrative to paint her as the aggressor. A lie can travel halfway around the galaxy, while the truth is putting on its boots. He has made a grave error. Alara said, her voice quiet, but resonant with the Anchorage's power. She turned to the empty space beside her, addressing the custodian. The Tartarus Anomaly. You called it a wound, a scar from a dishonorable war. What created it? The custodian's mental voice replied, tinged with an ancient sorrow. Is it still here? Alara asked. Alara finally understood. The scrappers, the Concordiate. They were all just symptoms of a deeper sickness. The true threat wasn't Kalen. It was the legacy of unchecked power that he represented, the same legacy that created the Orphan Maker. The Anchorage wasn't just here to be a judge. It was here to be a healer, to close the wound. Kalen wants to make this about me, Alara declared, a new audacious plan forming in her mind. He wants to paint me as a pirate. Fine. We will give him a trial. Not mine, his. A court is a place where stories are told and judged. She addressed her crew. Lena, I need you to draft an official legal challenge based on the Progenitor Accords. Cite every article on the rights of sentient entities. We are going to formally petition the Concordiate for a hearing. Nomos, you will find a way to broadcast that petition across the entire network, bypassing Kalen's censors. Jax, I need you to be ready for anything. He grinned, a flash of his old self. That I can do. And Custodian Alara said, turning her thoughts inward. I need you to do something you have not done in 10,000 years. I need you to prepare for a verdict. Not for us. For the Orphan Maker. We are going to put the most evil thing in this system on trial, and we are going to make the entire Concordiate the jury. It was the ultimate gambit. She would use Kalen's own legal system against him, forcing a public reckoning. She would turn his declaration of war into a classroom with the Anchorage as the teacher. The cost of failure would be their lives. The prize would be a new precedent for the soul of the Concordiate itself. The Anchorage pulsed with a deep, resonant hum, a feeling of ancient purpose stirred. The silver script on its walls glowed with renewed intensity. The court was about to be called to order. The custodian affirmed, the scales of justice weigh actions, not reputations.